Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate and I am so excited to share today's interview with you. I had Raecine of Owl Moon 513 on the channel, and for any of you who don't know Raecine, she is a phenomenal tarot reader. She is a great tarot mentor. She holds workshops throughout the year and Sabbath observances and all kinds of things, and she is exceptionally compassionate and skilled and all of the great things, and I'm sure most of you are very familiar with her channel. She's also one of my personal mentors, and so I feel very fortunate to have had her come on the channel. In this discussion, we get into all kinds of things surrounding religious conditioning, releasing it. Raecine shares her story of stepping out of her, the religion of her family and onto her own spiritual path. We talk about deity work and just so much more. So I really hope that you enjoy this conversation. I will make sure that all of Raecine's links are down below so that you can find her YouTube channel and her Instagram. You can learn all about her readings and her workshops and everything like that. So all of those links are below, and I really hope that you enjoy the conversation. So I am so excited to have you on the channel because, as I will have said in the intro, I've been working with you forever. You're one of my first mentors. You still do readings for me. So this is just super exciting. But one of the things I've been talking about a lot and thinking about a lot is this healing from, I'm going to say, toxic religious theology, because I don't want to just make it sound like all of religion is bad. And I don't think I've ever made it sound that way on my channel. So I'm sure that my viewers are going to give us a little leeway there. But so many of us are trying to heal from this toxic theology that was whatever, probably Christianity, but other religions too, as we step out of this and onto our own path. And so I just was really excited about being able to have you on the channel to talk about this, because this is something you talk about on your channel. And just all the things. So do you want to just give us your origin story, a little bit of your background here?
Yeah. So my background, especially in regards to the subject matter that you just mentioned, is when I was around 5, my parents, well, my father rejoined, but as a family, we joined Jehovah's Witnesses, which I've lived it. It's a cult. It's a religious cult. It is Christian based. And so I grew up in it was like a very strict sect, levels, right, of intensity to what you bring to the table with that religion. And so we were all the way hardcore, the rules, the dogma, the brainwashing was very real. It was very intense. And so I left at 19. I went back briefly with my husband because of my father. And then I left the final time. I was in between 21 and 22, I believe, Kate. So I always like to say, it's very, very difficult to leave. And sometimes what I've found over the years in discussions with others too is you do end up going back sometimes. And it's giving you that clarity that it's not the path for you. So it was very entrenched, very patriarchal religion, very, very against the sacred feminine, against women in general. So it was a pretty intense experience growing up. Does that give you some of the origin to that, Kate?
Yeah. So, because I always describe my upbringing as Christian light. Okay. Yes, we went to church. It was a Catholic one, and there was the Catholic dogma, but at home it was very
So for me,
God loves you and whatever, but it's still seeped in. But
yes, no. So for me, we went to what we called the Kingdom Hall. Everyone else would call it church. We were at church 3 times a week. Especially as a teenager, I had to go out in service. That's knocking door to door for 70 hours a week. So
70 hours?
70 hours a week, 70 hours a month. Excuse me, 70 hours a month.
Holy crap! But that's still
70
a lot.
hours a month. Yes,
that's still a lot.
Yeah, I was homeschooled from 6th grade forward. It's very insular. You don't talk to people who aren't a part of the religion outside of trying to get people to join the religion. So very hardcore, really stringent rules. You get disciplined publicly if you don't abide by the rules. So there's a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. It was not Christian light, even though, and I understand a lot of people have beautiful experiences with Christianity. I'm not trying to ruin that for anyone, but mine was very stringent.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call mine great, to be honest, because of all of the subtle stuff I've had to try and decondition over the years. Sorry, I'm trying to get a paper out. There we go. But obviously it's like nothing like that. And I'm really on a cult kick right now. I've been watching like all the cult documentaries and like all the cult podcasts and things. I don't know why, I just all of a sudden I've just been fascinated by it. It's horrifying, don't get me wrong, but it's fascinating. And there's so much stuff out there right now about like new age spiritual issues. There's like the Teal Swan documentary and the Twin Flame ones that I just started. But like it doesn't seem like the strict versions of Christianity get the same scrutiny that maybe they should. But if you can't leave, if you're not allowed to leave or talk to people outside the group, I don't know what else you call that.
Yes, exactly. Well, and a lot of these religions are a lot of them have a lot of money and a lot of power. So I know, like, especially in the case for Jehovah's Witnesses as a religion, they have a lot of money and a lot of power. And so they've been able to really hush even people who have left, who are trying to be public about the sexual abuse that a lot of us faced. And so they end up getting hushed all the time because of the money and the power that's involved there. So I think, and when you mentioned the new age cults too, it's like, it's the same thing, right? It's power, it's fear, and it's control. And so that's why on the channel, I talk about that grid of disempowerment. It's like, if someone can cause you to feel a level of fear, shame, and guilt, then they're able to pull the strings. And so I think that's what we're seeing. And I hope a lot of us are waking up to, there's a difference between God and spirituality and fear mongering and detrimental rules and beliefs.
Well, and that's why I'm on such a 7 deadly sins kick lately.
I know, I've been seeing that on Instagram too, Kate. I love it.
It's exactly how all these organizations and then the church seeped its way into society. It's exactly how they've created that shame and that programming. If they can shame you into believing that your normal human experience and reactions are evil or sinful, they can now control what you do. And if they can convince you on the money part, which is, I think, my favorite, right? Like, don't be greedy, so give all your money to the church.
The way I grew up, it was 10% of your monthly income should go every month.
Yeah, I think even tithing, it's fairly standard, I think, among all the different Christian.
Yes, I feel like there's some version of it for every modality within their religious sects, for sure.
I mean, and they need to take care of their leaders. I mean, I get that, like, I think that everybody needs to be like compensated for their time and stuff, but obviously there's a difference there.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I wanted to ask is about leaving that and how you kind of navigated that, because I know, I can't even imagine, the way these cults work is like, when you leave, you lose everybody.
Yes.
So what was that kind of like for you, whatever you're comfortable sharing?
So I will say, even though I was raised in the religion, I was very aware from a very young age that it wasn't my truth, and I was talking to other energies. And I will say, I grew up in the woods. So the land, like the spirits of the land, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, the energy of Satan as a guide, were very, very present, helping me to survive a lot of the brainwashing that goes on, especially around the fear piece. I will say at 19, the shock of, because the way that you're raised is, you're not supposed to look to higher education. You're supposed to be not of the world, right? So you have to be separate. So if you try to leave, you probably work for other people who are members of the religion, all of your family's in the religion, or the only family members you're allowed to talk to. So it becomes very difficult for children who've grown up to actually leave and make the leave stick. That's why I say, like, I went back too. It happens. It's really difficult to do it. It was definitely a culture shock for me, because I wasn't listening to, a lot of the music most people my age were, watching the shows most people my age were. So there was a huge culture shock for sure. And I think the hardest thing was, I lived out of my car for a time until my husband, my ex-husband, let me move in with him. It was very, very difficult to do, very scary. And there's also such a sense for women of disempowerment around making money. because you're supposed to be the homemaker. You know, you're less than the man. And so it was very hard for me at 19 to figure out like that I was strong enough and capable enough to make money on my own and to handle the finances and to know how to pay my bills and things like that. So it was like someone like ripped it's like the Matrix. It's like someone ripped the cord out, and then all of a sudden you're trying to figure out how to breathe in this space. So it was definitely very, very difficult. It was 100% worth it. And even though I did go back because my father told me he was ill and needed me to take care of him, it was much easier to leave the second time, and it really stuck the second time. So I will say, for those who are coming to your channel and my channel, who are looking to make a break from these type of experiences, be gentle. And I encourage like just one step at a time. And if you need to take it slow, take it slow. If you need to just rip that cord out, rip that cord out. I think the most effective thing for me at 19 was ripping the cord out. There was no way, because Jehovah's Witnesses abjure their children who leave, which means they don't talk to you. It's like you're dead. So they have nothing to do with you. So for me, it was like ripping the cord out was the only option, but also easier to just let it, you know, completely everything changed at once was easier for me at the time. I'm still unpacking a lot of that as far as, you know, therapy work and shadow work, but that in a way it was good to like everything is gone, because it did make it a little more difficult to go back. So I don't know if I'm making sense there, Kate, but it's a process. And I think that one of the most important ways when you start is to question the things you've been told are the truth. Question what you've been told is the truth. That was very helpful for me, especially around like 14, 15, to be like, well, why am I being told that this is how God is? Why am I being told that we are completely made of sin, to what you were saying earlier, that normal things, normal parts of being human are evil, and I'm engaging with Satan every time I connect with that? Those type of questions are really helpful, so that then when you're ready to make the big jump, you're stronger within your sense of self, because that's very important, to be strong in your sense of self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. 'Cause I even, again, with my like much different upbringing, it's hard enough for like me to let go of the conditioning and the fear that comes with, well, what if you're wrong, and all the things. Let's see, there was something I was going to say there. Oh yeah, for me that was Mary Magdalene, was learning her story, and then the whole thing started to unravel. Like, wait.
Love it. I love it.
So if everything you told me about Mary Magdalene was a lie, and I can point to the historical facts to prove that it was a lie, what else is
you lying
true?
to me about? Yes.
What else?
Yes.
So how do you go ahead?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, for me, like my first memory of a moment like that was reading the book of Job and being like, I just remember being like, why is Satan getting punished for doing what God is saying he should be doing? Like, I don't understand. Like, you made a creature, you got him here, he's asking the questions you've told him to ask, and now he's getting punished. I think that, and also the Old Testament is just so, if you actually read the Old Testament, like hardcore brutality. And I remember being young thinking, this does not line. You're telling me God is love and he cannot be charged with anything but love. And now I'm reading all of this and it's not adding up to love for me. Like I don't see the love in this story here at all. So those things were like those moments, light bulb moments for me too, Kate, of like, I don't know about this.
Yeah, something doesn't seem right here. It's over there. I have a book. The Satan, I'll put it below, but it's this book. It's a scholarly argument for Satan as God's executioner. And it's really good. It's very scholarly. So you have to be ready. Like my mom brain can only do like a few pages at a time, but it's very scholarly. But for anybody who wants that, it's very, very interesting. And so I'm pretty sure it's confined just to the Old Testament, but it's this argument about how God's executioner became this like big evil thing. Because when you read especially like the first parts of the Old Testament, he's clearly either a concept, not a being,
Yep.
or working for God.
Yes. Yes.
So I don't,
And so then why is he evil if he's working for God? If his job is to be evil, then he's
right.
not evil because that's his job.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, I'm sure that this will all like come together, but I'm curious to
Yeah.
know how you sort of stepped onto, I don't know what we're going to call like this alternative spiritual
Yeah.
path, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that these Satan threads will come together.
Yes. So I had, as I said, was always talking to other beings.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember doing that since I came into the world, into this body as Raecine. I was always talking to other beings. So as I was, growing up and starting to ask these questions and looking around and not lining up with what I was seeing, I was still having these dialogues with these beings. And even though a lot of people would be surprised, I actually grew up on a farm. We raised our own animals. We butchered our own animals. Like I was very much like in the
Mm-hmm.
woods, of the earth, doing those type of things. So I felt very connected to the land as alive. And I will say this for my father. He was very reverent around the slaughtering and butchering of animals. And so there, and I'm not trying to upset anyone who's listening to this, but I will say that like that, it was to see the reverence for honoring the cycle of life was actually something that was really profound for me. And so as I was starting to step out of that space and starting to look at what's my own spiritual path going to be like, I knew I was talking to these energies and they were very alive to me. Like whether they were real or not, they were alive to me. And so as soon as I came to terms with like, maybe I'm crazy, but these energies are helping me, I really started to look then at goddesses, the sacred feminine as an energy, and really like I was so thirsty for anything that brought reverence into being female and healing that part of myself, that I started to do lots of research on that. And also, I should say, I love Tori Amos, and a lot of her work has to do with deity and archetypes and the work of Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. So I started reading those works, researching those things, and like the path kind of built itself. And
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like the first goddesses that came forward for me, Kuan Yin, Kali, Inanna, and Isis, and they were so strong and so supportive and so loving that following a path, honoring them, just felt very natural and authentic. So that really like unfolded on its own. And I will say, like, if you are looking to explore working with deity, just start researching them, start exploring their myths, start, see where you resonate with them, and then start a conversation with them, because that was the most healing for me and really helped me to see like, oh, I may have like left something, but the shame that I'm still experiencing the shame from that. Even though I left it, there's
Mm-hmm.
still other things underneath the surface to explore. And I found the female goddesses to be very supportive in starting to open up and look at that. And I remember reading Jean Shinoda Boland's Goddesses in Every Woman and being like, oh, okay, like this is my path. I know that this is my path. I'm following this path, talking about this path. And then I was working at a print shop, and my first teacher came in to print out some booklets for a Reiki training. And she just looked at me. It was the most crazy experience. Like I was barely functioning. I could barely leave the house. I was so overwhelmed by other people's emotions. And I was just like trying to get a handle on that at the time. And she just walked in and she was like, "You are coming to my class." And I don't even know how I did it. I was so scared. I had no like background working with other people at all. And she just was like, you're my student, and that's it. So that was really how I started exploring this path, because she had a background in shamanism, energy work, and she was slightly new age, but I don't think she would have called herself that.
Sure.
So that really like solidified the work part of my practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's so funny when I don't know why to just have like a real human come in and be like, and you shall be my
Yes.
student.
Yeah, it
Because
was
like
crazy.
the guides do that. Like I've had a couple come in and be like,
Yes.
this one's mine, and
Yes.
she will be mine for her entire life. But to hear a story about like a real live human just
Yes,
being
to
like,
do it as
okay,
well. Yes.
I
And
shall
maybe
take
that's
this
why
one
I
with
listened
me.
to Kate. Maybe that's why I was able to listen to her too, because I had already been, like you just said, you kind of know when certain deity claim you and you're going to be working with them a lot because there is this sense of like mine, not in an ownership way, but like
Right.
we're together for at least a little
Mm-hmm.
while. We're together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
how it really, I've had a few of them like that. And my first one was Green Tara, actually, probably right around the time I started working with you, because I have only two decks that have Green Tara cards in them. And I have to take those cards out of the deck if I want any other cards to come out of it. So I
See?
will occasionally put those cards, like they'll be like on my altar, like obviously like we need to work, like there's a reason that this card keeps coming out. But if I want anything else to come out of that deck, that card has to be removed. And so that was like my first experience with one of them outside of the Mother Mary, who's sort of I sort of just describe her as like a family, like a patron saint of my family. But she's also one that I recommend to people a lot just because she's very compassionate, and she will come in and she'll say she's happy to work with anybody. And she'll also point you to who you should be working with more full time. Like she's introduced me to numerous, like all of a sudden she'd be like, and this is your next teacher. And I'm like, okay, super.
She's like a
So she'll
threshold
kind of come in
goddess.
and do that for
Yeah.
people, has been my experience. But
Yeah. And I actually personally found that Santa Muerta is like that too. Like she's very, there isn't a lot of ego with her. And I think listening to you talk about Mary, that sounds very similar of, here's the direction forward. Maybe I'm not coming with you for this leg of the journey. Maybe I am, but here's the way forward.
yeah. Well, and Mary's been used to cover up a lot of other divine
Yes.
feminine figures, and she's happy to show you where. She's happy to just point out, this is where I was used to cover this one up, and this is where, and she'll just point them out to you and show you where you should go next. And she's very, very happy to do that. So when did Isis come in for you? Because I know you talk about her on the channel all the time, so it's not like some big secret. Like I still have things I haven't talked about publicly, but you talk about Isis a lot. So.
Yeah. She did not come through right away. As far as like consciously I'm working with Isis, I would say Kali really helped me to leave the second time, the religion I grew up in. And then as soon as I remember, like my first really conscious where I was like, holy shit, was like we had moved, we were living in this little apartment that had like these beautiful, oh my God, Kate, windows in the ceiling, help me. Sunlights or whatever they are. Yes,
Skylights.
thank you. Skylights. Thank you. It had like this one skylight above, and I had my altar like underneath it so the sun could shine down on it. And I remember I was really working a lot. I felt like Kuan Yin was leaving at that time, even though I was very thankful for her. And I think it was something I think I was looking through, I have a big picture book called Goddesses. I think it's by Jalaja Bonheim. And I probably butchered her name, but you guys can look it up if you want to look it up. And I think there was an image of her and I was like, holy shit. And then I remembered being a kid watching old movies. Cleopatra was like one of my favorites. And I used to try to dress up like her all the time. And especially like my eye makeup at 19 was all based on Cleopatra. And as I was looking at that image, I was feeling into how like powerful I would feel when I used to play pretend like that as a little kid. And then I just felt, it's like you just said, it's hard to describe it, but like you feel them when they come in. And Isis was like, oh no, I'm here. And I'm here for good. Like this isn't a flirtation, or like, even as much as I love Kali isn't like constantly there. Isis is constantly there, just like I would say Satan is for me. Like, and then I started to see that a lot of like what I was experiencing as earth energy was her energy that at the time I couldn't put a name to it, not in what I was growing up in. But that had really been her. So I do think she's been there from the beginning, but I think she had to wait until I got to a place where I could contain the relationship that she started to then consciously show who she was. But
Mm-hmm.
like big, she's such a big energy, but it's not like Kuan Yin is unconditional love, in that she's very like soft waterfall energy to me, and Isis is like a big river. Like it's a very big expansive energy, but it's loving, but it's not soft, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. It's like, and there's an intensity to it.
Yeah. Well, I think some of them are very mm, almost like how you approach them is how they're going to treat you. So if you are approaching them like a child who needs a mother, then that's how they're going to treat you.
Yeah.
And if you're approaching them like a student who needs a teacher, then that's how they're going to treat you, or whatever it is. Because I know a couple, like again, Mary, the mother Mary, can be very like that. She can be a very just all compassionate mother, if that's how you approach her. Or if you want to teach her, she's got other things she can teach you too. But
Yeah.
you kind of have to, you almost have to ask. It's not just gonna,
Yes. And I
it's
think
not gonna
too,
hit you over the head with a textbook about what to learn next. You have to
yes,
ask.
because you have to ask, you have to be ready, right? Like that's free
Mm-hmm.
will. I do believe that on this plane, yes, there's the wheel of fortune, but there's fate, there's wheel of fortune, but we also have free will too. And I think a relationship with a guide, a relationship with deity, that is a partnership. Like we do have to say yes to it. They can witness us whether we're conscious of it or not, but to engage in dialogue with them or a working relationship, like you have to say yes to that. So I do think it does. I think, like I said, it depends on what you bring to the table.
Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
describing it like a phone line. Like if I'm gonna pick up my phone and call my husband, I can call him over and over and over, and my phone line can be very, very clear. But if he doesn't pick up an answer, and if his phone line isn't clear, we're not going to have a dialogue. We're not going to have a conversation. I
Mm-hmm.
know you probably hear this too all the time. Like, why aren't my guides talking to me? Like, why aren't they sending me signs? Like, why? I would guess that they are. You are just not seeing them, and you are not communicating back, because both ends of that phone line have to be clear, or
Yes.
nothing's getting through.
Yes.
So,
Yes. And it is like I have described it over the years too, like it's like a frequency thing. Or if you think of
mm-hmm,
like radios back in the day, it's like I've got to be, like you just said, on the other line. Like we've got to be tuned into the same frequency, or at least similar enough to be able to understand each other. Because I do think, like you said, they're always there, but we've got to be able to tap into. And I get it. Like I think if you're looking to have that experience, you have to be comfortable being still. And I know that that's really uncomfortable for people these days.
it's hard to sit
Yes.
still and be quiet. Like, all
And
of October, I lost my voice. Gone. I got better just enough to like do a few of the things that would be on my calendar. No voice. And the lesson in there was not lost on me.
and it's like I always say that about the Four of Swords too. That's like that fuck moment of like the universe. You didn't want to do the little thing that you needed to do, whether it's for your body or for your spirit or some amalgamation of the two. And so the universe stepped in for you.
They're like, you're doing too much talking and not enough listening. We need you to listen. Fine. Fine.
And I feel like for me, it's always like slow the fuck down.
Mm-hmm.
It's like slow down. You need to sit still for a little bit. So we just arranged a little sit still moment for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had another person. I know someone else who was sick all of October, and she called it a timeout. Her spirits put her on timeout. And so, like, yeah,
Yep,
I get that.
can
I get that.
Yep.
So, for people who are having trouble sitting still, who want to get to know their guides or whatever deity is coming through for them, what like quick tips do you have for that?
Yeah. So what I would recommend is, if it's possible for you in your environment to have some form of sacred space, like I have altars everywhere, but that's because I also live in an environment where I can't have altars everywhere. But if you can even just have one small area where you have something that's beautiful, that feels reverent to you, that you can sit in front of. And even let's say you only have 5 minutes, if you can just sit there. And what I will often do is just say, what do I need to know? Like if, let's say I'm trying to work with a deity, right? And so I might say, what do I need to know? And then just draw one card. And don't look at the card and be like, well, the justice card means. That's not what you're doing right now. This is your frequency assistant, right? So it's like, okay, so just sit and look at the card and let the feelings come up that come up. Pay attention to if you hear anything, if you have an understanding about something. Let those 5 minutes be receptive to whatever's coming through the ether. And then most important is to trust whatever came through in those 5 minutes. Like if it's something that's meant to, if it's from a guide, even if it's not what you want to hear, you're always going to feel better. If it's something that you don't really want to work with, it's not going to feel that way. So as long as you feel like nurtured within, even if it's a little scared, but you still feel nurtured, then trust what came through in those 5 minutes. Don't overthink it. I think what I see a lot of students and clients do is like they start trying to make it make sense in their mind. And we're not working in the mind space. Like this is the ether, this is something else. So it's much more about feeling than it is about knowing. So I would say like just do 5 minutes, but I do find like a sacred space is helpful because it's like creating something separate. It's like for that 5 minutes, like we're both moms, we know, like yes, I've got like 5 million things I'm trying to do, but for this 5 minutes in front of this altar or next to this stone or this pretty plant or whatever, like I'm doing this and I'm tapped into my spiritual journey now consciously. And so I do think it kind of hits a little switch that lets you receive messages a little bit more clearly, at least to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I think that tarot can be really helpful for that. For people, I won't name names, who are very good at overthinking. The nice thing for me about the tarot in the beginning was that it does have a structure. And so my brain would have just enough to
Yes.
my brain could let go of the structure because the cards were giving me the structure.
Yes.
And so that would let me surrender. I could surrender structure and control because the tarot has that. So It would give me a little bit of that.
I love that, Kate. And that's beautiful. Like you said, just enough structure that your mind could be occupied. And I do think sometimes it's helpful to just look at the mind as, this wonderful little being that we love, but it doesn't need to run the whole show. And so kind of looking at as a toddler that like, here's a toy, here's something to occupy you. Here's a little bit of structure so you feel safe. And now we're going to play. Like now we're going to expand a little bit more.
Yeah, I've been really working the last year on the embodiment piece and the letting my mind and my human ego being like the chauffeur for my soul and my path, not the one making the decisions. It just has the skill to drive the car.
Yes.
So I've been really working hard on that.
It's not like we are saying that we hate those parts of ourselves or we need to eradicate them. But like you said, so that they're not running the show, I think that's really powerful work to engage in.
I think it is a lot of the last, 3,000 years, the sacred feminine has been systematically erased. Let's not pretend like this wasn't done on purpose.
Yes.
And more masculine energy has been like the way to go. Like we've all been programmed to stay in that structure, constant growing of the mind, all of that. And so I know I actually love to hear you talk about this and know if you ever dealt with this. For me, one of my core wounds is like a crazy wound. Like, am I crazy because my mind can't rationalize this, or there's no proof, or there's not enough structure? And so I am constantly circling back into this crazy wound of mine. Did you ever deal with it, or was embodiment just so easy for you?
No, I think yes. I've definitely dealt with that crazy component, and it's difficult because when you are in such a patriarchal view and it is about like conquer and control and what, defining worth based on something outside of yourself. And it is all about like, prove it to me. And I've even found moving through the world, even now as an adult, as separate, completely like following my own path, that I still will come up against people all the time who are like, you don't have enough proof. It's not enough proof. You're a charlatan. This is all fake.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's definitely a deep wound for all of us women, especially when we start to access the feminine, because you cannot define it, you can't contain it, and you can't explain it. It's a felt, lived experience. So I think that crazy piece does come up for all of us. And what was really freeing for me, and I think I really stepped into this in my mid-20s, was like, so I am. So it is crazy. So it's not real. But you know what? I have a very distinct memory of being 15 and not sure how I was going to continue to survive, and Satan coming through and literally assisting me to survive the abuse I was dealing with. So to me, whether he's real or not is immaterial, because it was powerful for me. And so as soon as I started, and like I said, probably really around my mid-20s, to just say, it doesn't matter if it's crazy. It doesn't matter if it's fake. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. It matters if I'm in alignment with what feels right for me. And so that was very healing with that. But I still have moments where I doubt things, or I worry in that way. And now I'm just much more, I kind of just put my hands on my heart and just say, I love you. Like, I love this part of me that is so afraid of being punished, that you're trying to protect me right now. Like, I try to be very gentle with that part of myself and really see it as, what came through from trying to survive and stay safe, quite possibly through multiple lifetimes. Because like you said, the subjugation is long-term.
Yeah. When I heard somebody say, because we think about the witch trials as being in Salem, but in Europe, it was a very long period of time.
Yes.
And I heard somebody say that the witch trials never really ended. They just turned it into psychiatry. Not that psychiatry does not now have its absolute place, and it's beautiful and helpful for people. But for a while there, it was just a way to
do research into that. Yes, it's true.
Yeah. And now you're just crazy. When you have a normal, my issue with psychiatry and mental health right now is that we are pathologizing. What's that word? Whatever. We're taking normal human reactions like depression and anxiety, and we are calling them like, there's a problem with you for being depressed. When, like, hello, have you seen the world? Like, I think maybe you're having a normal human reaction to all the things that are going on in the world. So obviously, like, let's help people with depression. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're shifting the blame to individuals instead of like the systems and societies that are causing these problems in the first place. But that's its whole other.
Yeah, I was going to say, because we could also take the patriarchal discussion there too, because I do
exactly the patriarchy is always, it's at the root of everything. So talk a little bit more about Satan and any of the other darker beings that really helped you, because I think that, like we were talking about before we pushed record, a lot of us do this where we either tiptoe out of Christianity like I did, or jump out of it a little bit more like you did. But at some point, these darker beings start to step forward. And I think a lot of us don't talk about it because there's still so much polarization and stuff about it. I think by the time this is posted, my chat about demons with Kristen Ramazan will already be on the channel for people who want to hear about that. But I'd love to hear your take on this stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm always amazed by how reticent and kind of afraid I am to talk about this, because I'm like,
me too.
I've really lived through a lot at this point. Like, I don't know why this is so still, but I think this could go back to that crazy wound of like, I don't want to deal with he is a polarizing force, right? Of course he is. And people who are really afraid really feel a need to speak out and let you know how evil, how bad and evil and what dark forces you're in alignment with. So I think that's why it's been something that even for me, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to go there, because I have to feel really strong when I create content around that. So I'm working inwardly on being less reticent to share about it, because what I would say is working with his energy for me has been nothing but love. Like, every time, the way I've experienced Satan from a theological research perspective is fascinating, because you can go in so many different directions with, even like what we were talking about earlier. Is he a construct? Is he God's servant? Like what role, what myth is he really fulfilling? There's so many different ways you can go there intellectually. That's very enjoyable for the mind. But I would say as a deity, he, for me, in the Christian construct I was dealing with, he was the most loving being, unconditionally loving. And I, by nature of, because I spent hours and hours sitting listening to sermons. So because I was sitting so much, I would look like the perfect doll, but be talking to him during these, sermons. So I found him to be very, and I talked about this on the channel, I love his energy of questioning truth, even your own beliefs, the things that you think are the truth. Like, why do you think they're the truth? What about another perspective? And so I found his energy and other dark energies to be very healing around. And I think a lot of us that leave religious constructs, the dark energy, it's almost like you were so in the light that you have no choice but to explore the dark now, because if you've left the light, you've been rejected by the light, so now you've got to go to the dark, right? So like that makes sense from a healing perspective. We have to go and look at this piece because we've walked away from this piece. Either we've said no to it or we feel like we've been rejected by it. So I think we end up having to explore darker energies because we have to confront what we've all been afraid of when you start following your own path. So I think dark entities, darker energies really line up with that. Like we've got to go into the cave and explore that part. And then I think we all kind of reach a place where we come back to balance and we see like, oh, wait a second. I can, like, I'll be very honest. I'm still not there with Jesus. Like I'm just still not there with him. I know. And I know
Me neither. Me neither.
yeah, a
To
lot
be
of
honest.
people will say to
Yeah.
me all the time, Christ is in, I know I can't go there with you.
Yeah.
But I will say Azrael, the angel of death, has been very healing for me. And I do consider him kind of, he bridges the gap between light and dark to me. So I think you leave the light from Christian dark doctrine, you've got to go over to the dark. Then I think you come back into this, if you can trust yourself and your journey enough, you come into this really beautiful, very centered space where you can pull from light and dark with an understanding that dark isn't necessarily evil, it's contrast. So, and we chose, in my opinion, we chose to incarnate into a realm of contrast. So there's no dark without light, there's no light without dark. So we start to see that there's value in each side, and then can we unite those within the two? And I think dark deity, whether you consider it's an energy that you are working with or an actual entity that you are working with, like there's wisdom to find within the dark deity as well.
Yeah.
And to me, I look at Satan as the questioning God. I look at him as rebellion. I look at him as freedom. Like I really work with him very, very personally. So sometimes it's hard for me to like scroll out and see what other people are seeing because I so don't experience it that way. But even if you look at him as the God of the physical, the mundane, sexuality, sensuality, addiction, all of those areas are parts that in our human journey we're going to bump up against. And so if we personify it and interact with it and engage with it from a dialogue space, we can learn a lot instead of cutting something off and being so afraid of it that it's actually ruling the show in its shadow form. Whereas like when we turn and look at it and we deal with it, it loses that evilness and it becomes instead a medicine that can be potent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that's how I've experienced it. Like you kind of boomerang over to the dark when you leave. And then you come back to a space where you're like, oh, wait, okay, I can bring light in too. Like it doesn't have to, it's not just here. That's the same as over here. So let me bring it back to the center.
Yeah. That's why I'm always saying, like the dark and light, it's not synonymous with good and bad. They're both equally divine and they can be equally wounded. We can have wounded light show up just as much as we can have wounded darkness show up. And I would argue that we have a lot of people right now failing to look at their wounded light. And that's causing just as many problems as people who lean into wounded darkness. Whereas when we can heal and integrate both, then that's when we can find whatever balance looks like for us as individuals. Because I had you were actually a part of that journey for me, that slingshot into the dark, and then the light. I had Asherah and Eve and all these other like light beings start to come through, and I could feel them knocking during meditation, like the whole vision will kind of, and I'm like, nope, no, absolutely not.
I've so had that happen in session too, Kate. I'll be like sitting there channeling and I'm like, fuck, it's Jesus. And I'll literally say to my client, like, okay, so here's it. Christ came in, he's knocking at the door. I don't want to hang out, but I'll give you the message. But I know that feeling of like, man, I don't want to,
yeah,
I don't want to go here.
because I remember the first time it happened, I was doing a meditation. I was doing I was on a journey with like my darker guides, and the whole vision, all of a sudden it was overlaid with a lighter like something, and the whole thing, like from the edges, started to kind of like somebody's like in a cartoon when the monster is banging on the house and the whole house shakes. It was like that. I was like, I know what's knocking, and I am not interested. But that is because when we leave our Christianity, what we're leaving is wounded light. We're not leaving integrated, healthy light in most cases. Yes. So when they start to knock, they're not knocking to bring you back into the wounded light. They're like, great, you've looked at the darkness. Now let's pull it all together.
That's so well put, Kate. It's so well put.
Oh, it's terrifying.
And yeah, it's terrifying because you don't want to get back. Like, I know for me, I feel like I was fighting for my actual literal life in order to leave. And so I do think there's that fear of like, I don't want to get, for any of us who've left that, like, I don't want to be back in subjugation again. Like, I know how it feels to monitor every thought and feel such shame constantly. So I do think that's part of that fear of like, I don't want to go there again. I don't want to feel bad for being human. Like, I get why we don't want to, but then like you said, once we start to kind of open to it, which, and for me, I will say Azrael has been very powerful for that. As you start to open that, you see like, oh, that wasn't going to happen. That wasn't what was going to happen here. But the fear is understandable.
Yeah. See, and for me, that was Eve. She comes in and she can just like dissolve all that shame, that because she knows all about shame.
Are you kidding? Yes. She's like, she's held it for all of us.
Yeah, exactly. And none of, just like any of these other beings, none of it is even true. When you actually look at the scriptures, that's not even what it says. It's very frustrating. But anyway.
Again, agendas. There have been agendas, and a lot of the translations, there has been an agenda with the translations. And even when you start to do research on that, you're just like, there is none of, for me, like that was another thing where I was just like, oh my God, there isn't even a translation that I can trust that's being used by this religion, the one I grew up. Like just is like, I can't even trust your translation. So yeah, I digress. I could go off on a rant on that.
I know, my favorite fun fact about translations right now is that in the original Hebrew scriptures that would become the Old Testament, sons of God, demon, evil spirit were separate things. And evil spirit is the only one that was like, in quotes, bad. When that got translated into Greek, it all became demon, the Greek word for demon. And then when we got English, we have demon. So now we have sons of God, which depending on the scripture you're looking at are either fallen angels or just other gods. We have demons, which weren't evil in the original thing, because that's just not what it meant. And then you have evil spirits. And then when it came into English, it was like, that's all demon and it's all evil. And it's just like my favorite little translation fun fact, because in order to go through these different languages, it gave us this really watered down version of what used to have all this nuance and all this meaning and all this.
Yes. Yeah. It makes it black and white. And that's again, part of that control piece within these religions is it's either good or it's bad. And that's it. There isn't in between. There isn't any middle ground. There's no other space to find. And I think a lot of us that leave those type of religions will hear from people who haven't dealt with the lives that we have. Like, I can't tell you how many lovers I've had over the years who are like, your thinking is so black and white sometimes. And then I have to like stop and take a step back. But that does have a lot to do with that type of thinking, which even like when you're talking about translating into English, we lose all this nuance, right? It's like, depending, it's all very good or bad, and good or evil, I should say. And because that's a brainwashing thing that I still work on to this day with myself, which again, that's where I do think dark deity is very helpful to say, could you take a breath and breathe into that and maybe explore a different perspective? Maybe we could get a little curious about this instead of it being either this or that.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that a lot. So I have a random question before
Okay.
we wrap up. Isis, because I've just
Yes.
been thinking about this lately. Do you consider her to be like a darker deity or like a light? Because I just like to box things. And so I
Yeah.
have my world, divine dark, divine light. And I can't figure out which box Isis is supposed to go in.
Oh, that's such a good question, Kate, because I kind of feel like she's a little bit of both. And I feel like she had to do so much in order to remember Osiris, and in her trials with Set, it's like, if I had to, I don't know, Kate, like I want to put her in the dark side because that's where I love to hang out, but I guess if I had to say either or, light, but she's also well acquainted with the dark. Like I feel like she's got a foot in both worlds.
Yeah, which obviously a lot of them do. I just like my boxes.
But that being said, I would say probably she does lean a little more light, as much as I want to make her, as much as I want to bring her over to Hecate. Like, no, she's probably a little more light, but she's comfortable in the dark too.
That's how I feel about Mary Magdalene, actually. I think that her story has been very like light washed as it was reclaimed a little bit. But
yes.
Anyway, anything else that you want to share? Of course, all of your links will be below so people can find all your stuff. But
as far as that goes, everybody can check that out if they want to. But I'm so excited we had this conversation, Kate, because I do think I get so many messages from people who are really trying to unfuck their brains from really strict forms of Christianity and religion. So I think these kind of conversations are really important. So thank you for including me in it, Kate.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. This was so fun.
It was.
So I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation. If there's anything you would like to hear us expand on, please put them in the comments and I will see if I can get Raecine back on the channel. Again, all of her links are below and I will see you in the next video. Bye.